Here we go. We are beginning a new siman today, and perhaps maybe we'll complete it even in one day, which is not been our usual course of study, but it's a small topic, but one that is important if you enjoy using your fireplace on Shabbos. This is a very relevant siman. So if you want to have your fireplace working on Friday night, there are certain restrictions that you just have to make sure you meet, and after that, enjoy it. Enjoy the crackling and the popping and the warmth that comes into your house as a result. Okay.
By the way,
yes.
I checked the thing that comes in.
Yeah.
I
saw that.
You saw the shoot. So anyway, I checked on mine. Actually, it's connected to the body.
Connected to the body. Yeah, also mine. So it's one big thing.
It's all getting hot.
Yeah, exactly. Stay with me. It's all one big thing. Yeah. So the Shabbos, so sorry, Shlomo brought up last week at the end of the year, we were talking about the hot water urns. And there was this tshuva, was it Rav Eliashib? I forget already who was. You shouldn't use them because the cold water will flow, the not boiled water will flow back in from the little tube where it shows you the height of the water, and therefore that water will become cooked on Shabbos. That is not most of the urns, at least the ones that even have a built-in Shabbos motor. These are all just one unit. It's just a little window into what's going on the inside there, but it's all being boiled. I checked mine also. So those are, I don't know if those are older style, those ones that the separate one. They're very old style. So right. So those, okay. I hear what he's saying, by the way, because it is a totally separate thing.
It's a small portion of the water. It's not even.
No, even the smallest amount you could technically cook. That's why we have to be careful. It's a bigger discussion, but I'm particularly careful about this. If you utilizing hot water in your house, what happens is the hot water tank, the water goes down, and the cold water from the pipe goes into the hot water tank, and now it cooks. Now, you could make the argument, well, I don't care. It's a psik reisha de lo nichale. I don't care that the water comes in. But at the end of the day, you do, because if you continuously use the hot water, then it's good that it's hot. So I'm not so convinced by the argument that it's a psik reisha de lo nichale. Even if it's only after Shabbos, the fact that it's warm and hot is nichale, that it's not cold.
Someone I know keeps the hot water tap on all the time. It says, I'm not causing it.
It's just continuous. Right, because I can put it on before Shabbos.
Right. It's just wasting tons
it's just
of water,
wasting a lot of water. That's a lot of water that's going down the drain, literally.
But technically, that's okay.
You didn't do it on Shabbos. It's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of you set something into motion before Shabbos started. There's no deoraisa that you can evaluate.
She increases the flow when she needs hot water. So it's arguably not such a good idea.
Yeah, not so sure. Yeah. Okay. So Reish Nun Hey, Hachanas Ha'esh Kodem Hachanas Shabbos, the preparation of your fire before before Shabbos enters.
Which page over?
The very back page there of that sheet. You're on the right spot. Top of the page.
Top of the page.
Right where the new siman, Reish Nun Hey. You see it there? So the backside, wherever the backside is. There. Is that side? No, I think it's the other side. Yeah, backside there. Yeah. Okay. The Shulchan Aruch begins. Ein osim midura me'etzim samuch l'chashecha ad sheyatzis bahen ha'ur ve'inyan sheteha shalhaves ola me'eleha bli siyua eitzim acherim. Okay, let's pause right there. So you are not to make a medura. Medura is a bonfire, right? It's not like a small fire, like a big fire. Think about a fireplace from wood, close to dark. So late in the day, Friday afternoon, you should not make a fire unless sheyotzis bahen ha'ur, unless the light, the fire has taken hold in a way that the flame is sort of emerging up on its own without any help from other wood. Right? You're not to like I would still need to add more wood. Fire needs to be ola me'eleha, is sort of churning away on its own nicely, has a nice flame that has arisen on its own. If it's an individual piece of wood that you've lit on fire, not again, I don't use a fireplace, but I imagine a fireplace, you have more than one piece of wood in order to get a certain size fire. But here it says, let's imagine it's a individual piece of wood. Sarich sheyechoz ha'ur berov ovyo uverov hekefo. Then that individual piece of wood needs to have the fire, the flame needs to have grabbed echoz, meaning needs to have taken control over the majority of the thickness of the wood and the majority of the circumference, not the circumference, the external, I think that's circumference, like I don't know, circumference. Yeah, of the wood. So it needs to really be very much under the control of that fire, not a small little flame on the edge of it. You need to have it's really on fire. This piece of wood, birov of yo, in terms of the thickness and in terms of the again, is circumference the right word here? I'm not. Yeah, I think that's the right word. That's what you need to have. It needs to be majority on fire. V'im lo hudlika kol kach. If it's not so lit when Shabbos enters in, that's how this. It's a little flame, but it's the kind of flame that you might have otherwise been, turning to your family member and saying, "Hey, can you hand me another piece of wood so I can get this fire to really be more, stronger fire, a bigger fire, one where I feel confident that if I leave it alone, it'll be lit for a long time." Or if it's just an individual piece, but it's not, the majority of it is not lit when Shabbos enters, and then maybe actually on its own, it kind of works its way out. But at the time when Shabbos entered, I wasn't confident that was going to happen, but I ran out of time. My family pulled me in this direction, that direction, so I wasn't able to actually do what I wanted to do to ensure the success of this fire. But it worked out on its own. So aser lehanos bla b'Shabbos. I'm not allowed to benefit from that fire on Shabbos. Gezerah, it's a rabbinic decree. Why? Shema yechata, because I might shake the coals, or in this case here, shiachata b'yanid ha'etzim, here not the coals, but I might come to stoke and to shake the wood. Kedei shita leha, shall have it in order for it to catch fire in a more significant way, and then the flame will arise on its own.
That's really impractical in the shtetl, where they didn't have a separate den with a fireplace. I mean, it was one room basically.
Correct. You're saying if there was an issue that it was impractical for them not to benefit from it, they have to go outside essentially. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Also, I'm not such an expert at. I didn't grow up using a fireplace. I don't use a fireplace, even though I have a fireplace. I grew up in a house that had a fireplace, but we never used it. So I'm not an expert at this. And even when we go, and I was last year on a overnight camping trip with the 8th graders last year, and they made a fire, in a fire pit. I am not an expert at all in this topic in terms of just practically how to ensure the success of the fire. I only can see what I see, which is that you need wood, and moving it around does help. I imagine that if you've gotten to the point where the fire is sort of good enough on its own, obviously the fire will eventually go out at some point. But if it's good enough to where it will last on its own, they're probably a very small window between you're not sure if it's going to work to I'm sure it's going to work, right? Where this becomes an issue, right? It's only a problem if the fire is in this in-between stage, and then it turns out it works out okay because I'm able to potentially benefit from it on Shabbos. You know what I'm saying? Like if the fire is not very well lit and then it goes out on its own, so what's the hana I'm going to get anyways? Nothing. Here we're talking about this case where when I entered into Shabbos, it was this kind of in between where like it could go either way, and if in a perfect world, I would really kind of play with the fire a little bit more to ensure its success. But then it still works out anyways, and I'm not allowed to benefit from it. It's a very small window of what we're talking about here. But okay, that's the gzeira here that we're talking about. Ukashahud laka bashir, kashir, if it's lit properly to the right amount before Shabbos, so yachol hischamim connected with Shabbos. I can go right up to the fire and put my hands right up near it, warm myself up. I don't have to worry about anything. And he says here, Leishtamesh Lora, I could take my book. They didn't have artificial lights like we have today. Go right up near the fire, sit right there, nice and toasty, and read my book right by the fire. Now, you're like, okay, big deal. Well, we can use any light. Not necessarily the case, by the way. Ishtamesh Laora, if it's a situation where, and he'll even mention it, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to mention this, right? Sometimes the rabbis had fears like, oh, you're going to tilt the candle, you're going to tilt the fire so that you can see something better, in your book. Here we have a big fire, so we're not worried about like an individual flame. That might be more of a concern by an individual flame. But even by reading by an individual small flame, the rabbis were worried you would take it sort of in your hand and kind of tilt it towards your book, and this will cause the flame to get bigger, the wax will melt more, the oil will it'll catch more, the flame will be bigger. So here we're not worried about that.
How's that different from these Shabbos lamps that you turn?
Because you're not changing anything. But you're talking about actual candle, you're increasing the flame when you kind of tilt it, you're melting more. The thing about wax candle, you're melting more in that moment. And creating a greater flame as a result. And that's just the wax candle. I think you could probably do the same with other substances as well. But a Shabbos lamp, it doesn't. The whole chiddush of a Shabbos lamp is it doesn't change. You're just covering it basically. Okay. Beinim hu gabe al gabe karka. Whether this fire is on the ground. Like, why is there a fire on the ground in someone's house? Remember, their houses used to be not made of wood floors. They used to be made of dirt, so you could make a little fire pit potentially in the middle of the floor. Al gabehem menorah, or it's on some sort of candelabra that. But it's not. We're not talking about an individual flame here. We're talking about a larger structure. Vafilu himidvarim she'ein osin mehen ptila l'Shabbos, and these can even be utilizing wicks which are not generally used on Shabbos. When we get to the siman about hadlakas neros, when we talk about candle lighting for Shabbos, we'll see that there are certain wicks that the rabbis did not approve of for usage because they have a tendency, not always, but there was at least a nominal chance that the type of wick that was being used wouldn't get the job done without again, you kind of playing a little bit with the fire. So the rabbis prohibited certain wicks. If you ever read Bavei Madlikin on Friday night, which is the second chapter of Shabbos, you'll see there that a list of things that you're not allowed to light with, that you are allowed to light with. So so certain wicks are not allowed, but here, no problem. Any wick is going to be allowed, and we'll see the reason is, again, we're talking about a medura here. We're talking about a large fire. We're not talking about a small little flame. And therefore, we're not concerned that it's going to go out because of the kind of wick you're using, because we're talking about a huge fire here. Let's read the Mishnah Berurah's comments on Sif Aleph.
But the idea is to use the wood, not the wick. So how is that?
So you could use you can use certain wicks that may help. Again, this is where I admit my flaws in not knowing everything here. I can imagine that you use certain wicks though to help the fire kind of get started at the beginning, right? I mean, you could try to light a piece of wood on fire, and it will eventually catch on fire if it's particularly dry. But you want to really kind of get it going. Put a wick in between a bunch of wood, light the wick, and then let it do its work as it starts to light the other branches and the other pieces of wood on fire. I'm imagining that's what it is. You correct me if I'm wrong right here, but I can imagine you could use wicks in attempting to help the fire come along. Okay, Aleph. Now we're going to read Aleph, and I'm telling you right here, the Mishnah Berurah pulls out a whopper of a chumrah. I looked in the Aruch HaShulchan, he does not mention this at all. I've only seen this done once on Shabbos, someone who had their fireplace prepared on Shabbos, and it happened to be coinciding with the Shabbos. I was an intern, and we were learning Hilchot Shabbat that year, and we learned this siman. And then the next Friday, that Friday night, I went to Highland Park for Shabbos, and the balabas was hosting me. Says, how do you? Is there like some laws about having a fireplace on Shabbos? I said, well, it just happens to be. I learned it this week, and so we so I was able to explain to them how to properly prepare the fire. Not that there's too much complication in preparing a fire, based on what we learned. But here, the Mishnah Berurah is going to totally hedge and say, don't do this. Okay, I'm preparing you mentally for a chumrah that's not accepted by the Aruch HaShulchan. I don't think it's accepted in terms of, historically speaking, the Jewish people have used fire. You'll see even kind of makes mention to it. All the Ashkenazi Jews who lived in Ashkenazi lands, Poland and Germany and Russia, there's no way you didn't have a fire going on Shabbos. It's impossible for heat purposes. Okay. So he writes here, "V'hu adinim rotze lahasik as hatanur shel beis hachoref nami dino kimedura elayim kein hatanur tuach betit adaz shari." So he quotes here, I think this is the Tosefes Shabbos. That the same law would apply if you want to light a fire in your oven of the beis hachoref, right? This is the heating system that they had in their in the medieval Ashkenazi homes. The tanur beis hachoref was what you lit. It was an oven, and its main purpose was not really for cooking. It was really for heating the house. So we treat the law the same as the medura. So if you were to turn on your tanur beis hachoref, you need to make sure that the flame of the fire is able to be successful on its own without any further action required by you. So unless the tanur was tuach batit shari, unless it was the opening of the oven was also covered on top of its cover with another clay covering, as we talked about in the past, then it's permitted, even if it was only a small flame when its Shabbos started and it was unclear whether it would be successful, and then it turns out it's successful. And now that you're using the tanur beis hachoref, it's fine, no problem. You can benefit from it because there was no fear of shema yechate, that you're going to come and soak and play with the fire. Umashma, if you reach the shiur, the benchmark that close to dark, right when Shabbos is about to start, the flame has arisen on its own. Shapir dami, then you're good. You don't even need the clay covering, right? Once you've reached the stage where the fire is sort of it's humming along on its own, no problem, no restrictions at all. Umikol mako, and about so in my biurim nosafim that I have here on the side. So the question that was asked is why do we not require garu fekatum here? When it comes to food, you have to rake the coals, and so the answer that of the achronim is by food, the word is mitirdas ha'adam, because we're so busy. We are so concerned that we want them to be ready. We are almost more tempted on a habitual level, right? Just like we're more, we want to succeed, that we're more likely to come into a position where we'll stoke the coals, we'll move something, play with something, as opposed to here. This is really for heating and for seeing. The rabbis apparently, you have to give us some explanation. Chazal were not goes there. They didn't make a decree here that we were as concerned that Shema Yechata B'Gechal. They were only concerned that you would play with the fire when the fire wasn't yet successful, which is, by the way, more legitimate, because there, in order for your concern, your fire will not succeed, you actually might want to play with the fire. Where the cooking, you're trying to hasten the cooking process. There, they were thinking, it's like you're more accustomed to doing that. And you might make that mistake more likely, not that you'd say likely overall in the scheme of percentages here, but more likely than this situation, at least, where you're just trying to heat the house or have a nice fire, or anyways. I'm just acknowledging that there's a difference here, right? That there's no Gora Fakotum that's going on in this situation. Why? There's some machlokas, but that's one of the explanations. Anyways, Mishnah Berurah here says, says, nevertheless, it appears to me. This is the Mishnah Berurah talking. The lechatchila, nochol limnoa mehesek samlocha chashecha af beofen zeh. You really shouldn't light any fires close to Shabbos, even in this manner. Even in this manner. Where I think he's referring to, even in this manner, means even where the fire has already arisen on its own. What's the whole fear? Says rather, what will be your eshi, you'll see that there will be even that even when the lighting is finished on the weekday. So you'll say, I did it. I did the job. I lit the fire. It's good. Even on the weekday. So it's still Friday. So it's still Friday when I've done the job. The fire is going. It's beautiful. It's a big fire. So he says, but what will be left in the tanur? The udim will be left in the tanur. What are the udim? The udim, I actually looked this up in the Jastro. It's a wood poker. Okay, it's made out of wood and it's a poker to like move things around. So you have the udim are going to be left in there. And so undoubtedly what's going to happen at the end of the day, you're going to do, I think what he means is lechabotan is to put out the fire, right? Kibui is to extinguish the flame. So you're going to extinguish it at the end of the day through a non-Jew.
He says that the Udim are.
What do you have it?
So
they're used to.
No.
What is he saying?
So it's wood that still
still has potential.
Fire,
It's still
but
wood
it's
on
not
fire.
yet turned into fire.
Right. So yeah, it's wood. So you're saying it's a udim, is just they're on fire, right?
Right.
So it's just pieces of wood on fire. Okay, fine. That still works here, right? You're still going to have pieces of wood in the oven that are yet to be fully consumed. And what are you going to do? You don't want these to lose these pieces of wood, which still have potential for fire here. So you're going to ask the non-Jew to put it out for you, right? In order so that it doesn't, the oven doesn't cool down. So you're like, I don't want this piece of wood to get completely consumed. Maybe you're going, I don't know, it sounds like maybe you're going to bed. You want to save the piece of wood. So you're like, I'm done for the night. You go over to your non-Jewish friend, your neighbor or servant, whatever, you say, can you please put out the fire? Put it out so I can save this piece of wood. Right? That's how you understand over there? In that sense. So you're trying to save this piece of wood because like there's potential in it. I thought that it was like a wood poker that you could still continue to use if you put out the fire. So maybe it's hainuhach, maybe we're saying the same thing differently. And you shouldn't do this. You're going to be tempted to do this. You're going to want to save some pieces of wood, and you're going to tell your non-Jewish friend to do kibui, which is extinguishing the flame. Anyways, I don't know. But Steve, is that consistent with what you have there? Something like have some commentary there. The one part here it says Kadeshlo Yiskarer Hatanu. Right, when he says that in order that the tanur shouldn't cool down, right?
How is that making sense? Because,
Yeah, it doesn't. It's
that's
just the
heat.
opposite.
That's heat. If you shut off the heat, it should be colder.
Right.
How is tanur done involved in?
Let's work this through. Hold on. I had this yesterday in my head. I worked it out. All right, so he says here, Muchar Chulacha Botan, Livasof, Ali the Eno Yehudi, Kedei Shelo Yiskarer Hatanur, Meaning you don't want it to cool down. And if you wait it out, it will cool down, right? If you wait it out, obviously the wood gets consumed. It'll all cool down.
Maybe he's talking about all the fires. It's not gonna bring in fire because you actually if this gonna be extinct, if the wood is gonna be extinguished by usage,
Yeah.
then there's it won't be able to catch other wood and continue the fire. And then therefore you would ask someone to take.
You had it there for a second.
I thought that had it, but
Yeah, Steve, what do you want to say?
He says here, על ידינו יהודי כדי שלא יתקרע התנוע, הם ימתין, and then he has to לסגור פתח התנוע עד שיוכלו.
Closing the oven.
Right.
So מוכרח לכבות על לבסוף, כדי שלא יזכר התנור, אם ימתין till he closed the oven door.
Right. לסגור פתח התנוע.
So right, so you think bottom line is you have these udim that are left in the time of these pieces of wood, and you're going to, for some reason here, again, I'm not an expert on the fire situation. It sounds like you're going to have to put out the fire at the end of the day, or you will be tempted to put it this way, to put out the fire through a non-Jew. We're going to ask a non-Jew to help you in order that you have to take up. So that's why I think this is a poker. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what you have there.
But it doesn't go with the poker.
Well, he said, can you read what you wrote? What they have there?
For Udim,
Yeah.
right, Exim Shaish Boeret Bahem, right, but Dayan Lo Hafnu Gechavim, and then in the further notes.
But I know hafchu hagechalim, meaning you
Right, so
didn't.
they're still on fire, there's pieces of wood that are still burning.
But why does it say gechalim though? Gechalim are coals.
Well,
No?
they hasn't completely
yeah,
consumed
if
the wood.
they consume, they become gechalim.
They become gechalim, so they're not fully consumed. So what you're going to want to do here, what you're going to want to do is, it's a little bit on fire. You're going to be tempted to pull it out and go, right? And you want to save this piece of wood. Because you want to close the oven. And in order to close the oven, you need to, that's why I thought this was a poker, right? Because you want to take this out, you want to get it out so you can close it. But now this thing is on fire. And if I have to let this piece of wood kind of go out on its own, the whole oven's going to cool down by that point, right? Until, if I have to wait until this piece of wood is totally consumed, again, that's what my assumption here. That's why I thought it was utilized for poking,
He has a paragraph.
where he explains this further.
He says,
Let's hear
"K'dei
it.
להבין המשך דבריו, יש להבין ולבאר סדר הבהרת התנאים בימיהם."
Please tell me how they lit a fire in their days.
כך היה סדר הבהרת.
Okay, this is how they lit it.
מעלים עצים בתנור ומעבירים אותו. So you.
You put the wood into the oven, getting it ready to light.
בזמן שבעורים העצים פתח התנור פתוח.
Okay, so you open the oven when you're going to light it.
Open, right? Why? כי בשביל הבהרה צריכים העצים הרבה אוויר. You need air.
Okay, good. You need air for a fire. Absolutely.
גם אם יסתום התנור מחבת שאינם דולקים יותר, מרבים בעשן. So also if you close it, right, then you're going to get a lot of smoke. וכשגומרים העצים לבאר, סוגרים את פתח התנור. So when they're done burning,
When you're done burning, they close the oven.
ומחמם התנור את הבית מחום הגחלים. So
So just the
fire
coals.
goes out, you got coals, close the door now. Good. Warms things up.
So what happens if there's a piece of wood in there? I got it.
So there are sometimes you got wood, but it's still
It
burning.
didn't get the.
ואחר שכל העצים כבר נעשו גחלים, עדיין הם בורמים, ודרכם היה לכבותו, וכדי שיוכלו לסתום פתח התנור. So there's some that is still burning.
Okay, that makes sense.
So close it, פתח התנור, ולא יצטנע התנור מחמד שהפתח פתוח, you don't want to get cool because the door is open.
Correct.
בשביל העצים בודדים שעדיין.
Why you need to buy those?
There's a few that are still, still get closed, right?
Okay,
ולסתום התנוע בעודו בוער, אין מוציאים מחלק שמערבב בעשן. You don't want to close it while it's still burning because then you're gonna get a lot of smoke.
so, okay, so bottom line, I thought just for Steve Smith's benefit, if you heard everything there, but bottom line, so in Steve's Oz V'Hadar edition, which I clearly need to buy, he explains the process of how they did it, how they made a fire. Bottom line, they had an oven. Inside the oven, they would have the wood. You would light it. They had to be air in order for the fire to succeed. At a certain point, it turned to coal, basically, and then you wanted to retain that heat so then it could spread throughout the house. So they would close the door of the oven at that point. So what happens if you had a piece of wood that's kind of getting in the way? It hasn't fully been consumed yet, and now you're going to end up with a lot of smoke instead of the heat. So they would take out those pieces of wood that just didn't catch completely. They didn't burn completely, but everything else is pretty much burned. So he's going to. So now, okay. So what's going to happen? You're going to have left some udim in the tanner, some pieces of wood. What are you going to do? You're going to put them out because you want to close the door of the oven. You're going to ask an Andrew, hey, can you stick your hand in there, take it out? Because we don't want it to cool down by the time I close it, so it can spread heat throughout the house. If I wait till this thing completely consumes, then I'll lose all the heat. Thank you very much, Steve. That makes a lot more sense than what I was saying before. So he says, and so the mission verse says, don't get yourself involved in this, because if you know you're going to have to do this, then don't do it all together. He says, he says, that's not like the heter, by the way. Don't start comparing the heter that are given in the Ashkenazi lands, which are cold, where there you're allowed to use a non-Jew to light the fire in your house. Because what else are they supposed to do? There's no other advice I can give you, right? Either you're going to freeze to death, or you're going to ask the non-Jew to turn on the fire. Better to ask the non-Jew to turn on the fire, to light you the fire. Aval hacha, sorry, Demasha hisik esmo kvar hiskara, because at the end of the day, Shabbos day, whatever you lit Friday night before Shabbos is not on anymore. So you have to turn on. You have to get the non-Jew to relight the fire Shabbos morning. Aval hacha, but in our case, harei yachol lahasik mikodam, you can light it earlier. Im lo shehaya ones bazen, unless there's some sort of ones situation that is going on here. Now, Bali, this totally changes my understanding of the Mishnah Berurah, and it's not as much of a chumrah as I thought. It's a chumrah, by the way, but I think what he's saying when he says the first part, he's saying you have to be this whole process has to be done by the time Shabbos starts. The Gemara says you just have to have the shalhevet olam eleha, the flame is arisen on its own. Here he's saying, let's push the goalposts back. You need to finish this whole process. The oven door needs to be closed. All the wood needs to be, gechalim, coal, which is again, it's a chumrah. He's pushing the goalposts back. Again, in the Aruch HaShulchan, he does not mention this at all. And I assume that they were contemporaneous. He was aware of this problem too. He doesn't mention it at all. I don't know that we would deal with this situation in our area today. With our fireplaces today. So I'm not sure it's a transferable situation, but I'm not so sure that everyone was holding of this chumrah in those days either. If they were, believe me, the Aruch HaShulchan would have mentioned that the minhag is today to do da-da-da-da-da, and he doesn't say that. Okay. Sif Kata, thank you very much, Steve, thank you to the Oz V'Hadar printers for their excellent explanations. Again, you see, because of my lack of knowledge on how they would make a fire, you have to know that. You see, that's the thing with a lot of these things. You have to know the mitzias in order to fully appreciate what's being said. 95% of the time, I could probably get away with it, but this time, I told you, and that fires wasn't not my specialty. But I should have realized. Yes, you need air in order to for a fire to succeed. That one I shouldn't have needed any assistance with. But anyways, okay. Siv katan beis ad shiyatzis v'chulei. Okay, the standard being that the fire has to catch on its own and have a nice flame on its own. Because then we're worried you're going to stoke and shake the wood once it's already Shabbos, and now that's an isser of havara of kindling, a bigger flame. Gimel, Belisiyua, you can't. You should be at the point where you don't need to have any other assistance from other wood. The Hainu Sheyehei Tzarich Lomar. You should be in the position where you need to be able to say. Sorry, you don't need to say the following. Have eitzim dakim. Can you bring me another piece of wood over there, another thin piece of wood? V'naniach tachtehem kedei lavir, so I can place it right underneath here and it'll catch fire a little bit more. If you have to at all have a havamin in your head that I need another piece of wood in order to make this fire succeed, you're not yet at the point where you can utilize this flame on Shabbos. Dalid barov of Yov. If it was a singular piece, right? So it needs to be rove of Yov. Most of the thickness needs to be on fire. The fire needs to go internally, betoch of Yov adrubo, internally to the majority of this piece of wood. The gam sheyispa sheit berov hakefo mibachutz, and it needs to on the surface. That's the word, by the way, not circumference. I think it's really surface. On the surface of the wood, it needs to spread out all around on the surface, majority of it. Hey, aselehanos. If it's not yet at this stage, you're not allowed to benefit. Perush afilu hudlika achar legama. Even if it totally catches on its own afterwards, and now it's a churning, beautiful fire. Kamosha kasa the self simulation of the asasiot turmusin. Now we talked about in the previous dinner the asasiot, these kitnios, these legumes. And the turmusin, the lupine, I think we said it was. These are very. They don't require much cooking, and if you make a mistake with these, where you place them inside the tanur before Shabbos, and let's say you didn't meet certain conditions, right? So then it's usur, and you can't have this. You can't consume it until after Motzai Shabbos. So the chol she'avar, same thing here. The chol she'avar al divrei Chazal, if you violate one of the rabbinic decrees, so asur lehanos ad Motzei Shabbos. The rabbis say you don't follow our rules, so you can't enjoy this until after Shabbos. Obviously, this fire will be long gone by the time Shabbos ends. Vav ukeshehudlika. By the way, that's probably perhaps why they don't mention here. Until Motzei Shabbos, because it's not practical. The fire's not going to last that long. Okay. If it is lit properly, perish b'ojom kodem Shabbos. Before kodem Shabbos, so if you've lit it and the flame has taken hold very nicely before Shabbos, so yochol hischamim zayin, you can use it to heat and hataz b'siman ayin reish hey. In ayin reish hey, now that's not far off. Why is it not reish ayin hey? Because the simanim in Shulchan Aruch, whenever they spell a bad word, they change the arrangement. So it's actually reish ayin hey. So we're not far from that, by the way. But anyways, they write ayin reish hey. Another one, by the way, siman shin mem daled is not shin mem daled because shmad is also a bad thing. It's so that I think they changed it to shin mem daled or something like that. Or sorry, shin daled mem or something like that. Whenever it spells a bad word, they change it. Okay, so ra'ah is bad, so we don't talk about that. Okay, so the Taz in that simon writes, "Mikol makom yesh li zoher shelo leishe besamuch eitzel zanvos ha'udim." So nevertheless, you have to be careful so you don't sit near the tail of the wood. So let's say you have a piece of wood that's in the fire, but the tail of it's kind of sticking close, to you outside the fire. It's not on fire. You're sitting right next to it and reading your book. So he says, the Taz says, I don't like you sitting right next to that part. Because you could push it, and then it'll, you're going to push it right back into the, you'll push it right into the fire, and then it'll cause, a new part of the piece of wood to start burning. So practical advice: don't sit next to the piece of wood. These are my kind of guys, The Eli Rabbah and the Tosefes Shabbos like, don't make a new gzeira. Be careful, but don't make a new gzeira. We're not concerned about this. You're allowed to use this flame. I feel with samuch lamadura. You could sit right next to this madura, right next to this fireplace. Oh, hatanur or the oven. Unless you're lurking at something and it requires a lot of you're looking very carefully at something. Tzarich iyun rab, you have to look at something very carefully. O likros kenegda, or you need to read something right next to the fire. Das chayshin and shemayate. Then we're concerned that you're going to tip the flame, as we'll talk about in Siman Ayin Reishay. Now, if you're next to a medura, you're next to a fireplace. I'm not sure how, excuse me, I'm not sure how you tip the flame, right? I understand maybe if you have access to the wood, but if you're near a fireplace, particularly today, a lot of the fireplaces have like almost like a mesh door, or like a little.
Yeah, I'm surprised they don't require like a screen around the fireplace.
You're saying like as a rabbinic zera.
Yeah.
Hinda's going to make a new decree. We have to have a screen. Oh, where did that come from? There was a great achon Hinda. She said, so yeah, it actually is surprising that you're not supposed to put like a little screen there.
Yeah.
But today, a lot of the fireplaces on their own, they have like a little screen anyway, so you're not gonna get too close to it. I'm surprised that in this last point here, even if you're looking at something very carefully, how can you tip a fireplace? The fire, you can play with it. Shemayate, that's going to be coming up when you talk about it. Small candles. When we get there, the whole siman about Hadlakas Neiros, and you read by the piece of wood sticking out. So they're saying you're gonna just poke it back in a little bit more. Yeah, I hear. Anyways, in our situation today, I'm not sure that you're gonna sit right next to the fireplace that close to it. It's probably too intense. The heat is too intense. You're probably gonna sit a little bit further away from it. Anyways, if you have a smaller candelabra, okay, then we could talk about that. That's what Ayin Reishay is about. Okay. Sif Katan Ches. Vafilu, this is talking about that you can use things that wicks that are generally not allowed on Shabbos. Why? What's the difference? The Medura, when we're talking about a real big fire here, Mitocha Shahesek Rav, since there's so much fuel in this fire, there's a lot of the wood and the wicks, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. Kol echad mavir es chaver. Everyone's going to burn their friend here. The wick's going to burn this thing. There's no, the whole fear of the wicks when we get to that sivin is that the substance is not trustworthy, that it always catches fire perfectly, and you're going to start to play with it and tip it and whatever. You'll be tempted to because the lights are going to go on. Okay, let's read Sif Beis. Yesh Omrim, back up on top. Yesh Omrim should be Pachamim. Afil lo achaz bahem ha'ur ela kolshu sharim bipnei shehem dolkin v'holchin. When we talk about pecham is coals. So you take coal, okay? Think about how you start your barbecue, right? He says when you light coals, even if the flame has only taken grasp a little bit, it's all good. Why? Because you can trust that will start to spread from one coal to the next coal to the next coal to the next coal until it's a nice fire. Here, more trustworthy than dealing with wood. Coal apparently is I don't know if I'm not a big barbecuer. Is that the case? Coal, you light it, you kind of catch it on fire a little bit, and then it's good to go.
Because the wood is not strong to reject the fire.
So this is your experience that the coal is a lot easier, right?
That's what the concern. That the fire is going to stop somewhere because once it's lit, it's going to go. It's a soft wood. It's already
right. Got it. Okay, so there's no stopping this flame. Is that what you were going to say, Steve?
I mean, it doesn't say anything here, but I don't know.
Yeah.
If you make a coal fire, still coals, right? I mean, you can move them around.
Yeah. It has to at least be a coal shoe. Coal shoe is very little though. We're
Right.
talking about a little flame.
I mean, we have gases. Used to have coals.
You have to play with it, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure here. By the way, this reflects one opinion. The Rambam actually disagrees with this. The Rambam, because this reflects the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who most Rishonim read him as continuing or furthering the Tanna Kama. He agrees with Tanna Kama, but he says, well, by this, you could be even more lenient. The Rambam reads the Machlokas as being that Rabbi Yehuda was arguing with the Tanna Kama. The Tanna Kama would never agree with this, and the Rambam actually paskins against this line. Here, the Shulchan Aruch paskins against the Rambam because he's the minority opinion. But Perhaps the Rambam didn't like the scientific aspect of it. He didn't like it from a scientific perspective. Though if you read the Yerushalmi, the Aruch HaShulchan points this out. If you read the Yerushalmi reads it as Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Tanna Kama and is just merely adding on to the Tanna Kama this extra fact. So, anyways, this is probably the shot in the Gemara, but the Pechamim, again, what kind of coals were they use? It's like you have to fully understand what they were dealing with to really get this. Yeah, today, by the way, you might be able to say that if you have a gas situation with coals or whatever, and you light a little bit when it takes off, like you don't have to worry. Maybe that's this equivalent. I don't
So I
know.
have a question.
Yeah.
The tanur that we're talking about here, called tanur, did they use it for cooking or just for heat?
The Tanur Beis HaChoref was primarily used for heating.
Okay,
it was like a heating
we
element.
discussed about cooking on Shabbat. Kechalim, right?
Right.
We discussed, we can make. So it's a different tanur then? It's all different.
Yeah, you could in theory cook on top of the Tanur Beis HaChoref or reheat things or whatnot. But I believe Tanur Beis HaChoref, its main purpose was to heat up the house. You could cook in it though. That's just the reality. I don't think it was made for that though. And probably it was not just even from a practical perspective, like where you put
So
the
they have a
food.
different tanur.
Yeah,
I think so.
they had separate.
Yeah,
Yeah, separate, okay.
one was for heating. Yeah. Okay, let's read Sif Gimel now. Medura shel zefes v'gofris v'shel kash v'ugvava. If you have a flame, a medura, a bonfire, that's primarily of sulfur, or zefes is tar. Tar, gofris is sulfur, kash is straw, gvava is stubble. That's like the bottom of the straw. After you cut the straw, there's the stubble that's left at the bottom. If you look in the Parsha Shmos, when Paro decrees that that the Jewish people have to produce the straw on their own, I think it talks about, Tosfos talks about what Paro was saying is that you can go take the gavava, go take the stubble. Like it was even worse of a decree. Bottom line is the kash is is I think the stalk, the top part of the stalk, or maybe it's the lower part of the stalk. But the gavava is like once you cut it off, it's like the stubble and that's left of what you cut from the straw. So this is what you make your fire from. Even if the flame only has caught a little bit, it's permissible. Why? Because these things, the fire moves quickly on these things. You imagine lighting a piece of straw on fire, the straw will be gone before you blink. So if you have a big pile of straw, so take a little flame right before Shabbos, 10 seconds before Shabbos, you light a little flame. Even though it's not a big fire yet, totally fine. You can use that flame on Shabbos. Same with the sulfur and the tar. It won't last long, correct. It'll go out very quickly, correct. Right.
How practical was this for them to use kash?
Probably not so practical.
They may use it as kindling.
What?
As kindling.
Oh,
So
okay.
what's the story there?
But then you have the wood to worry about.
Yeah, so you still have to wait for the wood to catch.
Right. You have to worry about the wood.
Right, which may be its own standard, right? Yeah. I'm not so practical. I'm not sure how practical this is, but anyways, this comes up in the Gemara. Ayin the Gemara. Look at Sifkat on test. We'll go back upstairs in a second. Shal Zefes, Ayin the Gemara. Dehuadin Shuman v'Shava v'Chol Davar Hanitach. This is the halacha by Shuman is fat, like animal fats, or Shava is wax, or anything that melts. Davar Hanitach is anything that melts. Anything that melts, once you get a little flame, you can be confident that that's good enough. You don't have to start playing with it. First of all, you can't really play with it. Imagine a large wax candle. You light the wick, you can try to melt the wax faster. At the end of the day, the wax will melt at the pace of the wax will melt. It's not quite like wood where it spreads with vigor. Yud shel kash ugvava, kash zanve shibalim. He says that he defines here kash ad zanve shibalim. It's the tail of the stalks. Okay, so I think it's like I don't know. I don't know, is that the part that comes out, the
They said
straw?
gvava. They said kashkin gvava. That's what he described.
Yes,
It's-
ugvava
it's-
shegove misade achar aksira. That's what you are sort of gathering in the field after it's been harvested. So that's the stubble. That's the stuff that's left behind, right? That's what you're gathering. That's the gvava. Kash is the zanve shibalim. I believe that's the stalk part of it. It looks like a tail, I guess. That's why it calls zanve shibalim. Okay. Anyways, let's go back up on top now. Okay, so these things catch easily, so they're permitted even if it's a small fire. V'chein medura shel kanim. Okay, if you have a medura of sticks. Okay, v'shel garine tamarim, date pits.
Oh, it's right.
Okay, shehem mifuzarim, when they are kind of spread out, they're not bundled together. Great, a little flame is good enough. Now, if you question that scientifically, don't worry, you're not the only one. The Rush also agrees with you. This is the Rambam and the Rif's girsa of the Gemara. Aval im hem kanim, and in addition, aval im hakanim agudos, if they're bundled together, or havahagarinim basal, or the dates are in a basket together, the pits, I'm saying. Srichin shiyotzis bahem haur ashadei hashalheves olam eilem. Then you need to light it to the point where the flame has arisen nicely on its own. That's the Rif and the Rambam's. That's the Rif's version of the Gemara in his edition. If you look in the Rush's version, how he writes it down, he has the opposite. That no, what makes more sense? That if you have a bunch of individual things, so a little piece of wood, you light a little piece of wood, no problem. It'll spread very quickly. Sorry, a little piece of wood, unlikely that it'll continue to go over to its friend, right? So there you need to make sure that the fire is really a big fire in order to, this whole situation is able to continue. An individual, but if it's a basket of the pits or a bundle of sticks, you light one stick, it's all touching each other, it's all next to each other. Look at the last comment of the Mishnah Berurah, and then we'll end. The reason for the first opinion of the Rif is when they're spread out, and all you need is a little flame. Those pieces of wood are on their own burn. Individual piece of wood, you just need a little fire, and the rest of the piece of wood will catch. If they're bundled or they're in a basket, well, maybe the flame is not going to successfully take hold there because you have a lot of substance to burn, and maybe the flame is not strong enough to get the job done. It's not going to go inside that bundle. That's the Rif and the Rambam's understanding and approach. The Rush and his son, the Tur, they have the Yeshomer opinion. It's the opposite. When they are all scattered, Kol achas, they're not like tightly bound together. Kol achas, then lo timsa es chaverta. One's not going to find its friend. Livara, to burn it. Ve'hem kavim v'holchim, and they're going to burn out. Right? Hilchot tzrichim rov. Therefore, you need most of the wood there in that situation, or most of the pits should be on fire. If they're tied, excuse me, when they're tied together, okay, then all I need is a small flame. Once it's tied together, it'll catch everything. Same thing with the garinim, with the seeds that are in a basket together.
So the idea is not that you that it has every piece of wood has to be lit before Shabbat starts.
No,
The idea is that you might try to move them around so they can catch fire. Is
exactly.
that the concept?
Bottom line here,
That is
the
concept.
underpinning is here. If the flame is in a situation where I don't need to really play with it anymore to get it to a place where I feel comfortable that it will successfully continue on its own, then there's nothing more to do, right? That's why if it's a piece of straw, okay, the straw doesn't need more than a little flame, and it'll go quickly. But a piece of a piece of wood, or if you have a whole situation, you have a bunch of scattered sticks, and you want a fire out here, So if I light one stick on fire, according to the Rush, right, that doesn't help me with this stick over here. So he's saying, no, you need the majority of them to be lit, so that it really creates a situation where all the rest of them will catch fire too. If it's a situation where I'm not confident that the flame is going to that this fire will succeed on its own, then I can't use that flame on Shabbos, right? It's only when, which is why, for the most part here, you're not going to be stuck in this situation. Before Shabbos, you're trying to get the fire to be ready. So you're going to get it to a point where it's ready. And if it's not ready when Shabbos starts, so it won't be ready and probably won't succeed. And if it does succeed, the off chance that it succeeds, so then you can't use it. So that's a very small case.
Which we're using it differently when talking about water. We want to make sure that all the water is for Shabbat, as opposed to
You're
more
saying
water
for cooking?
coming into it and then later on warming it up.
You're saying in the,
Here is the wood, it's 2 pieces of wood. One of them is lit before Shabbat, the other one is not. But I'm sure that's going to catch up. So the other wood is being burned on Shabbat, starting to burn on Shabbat.
well, again, food can cook on Shabbos as long as you set it into motion with the proper, you rake the coals and this, you can set it into motion for Shabbos and it can cook on Shabbos. Because again, if I do something before Shabbos, I can never violate a biblical prohibition. Rabbis put restrictions. Here's an example we just learned today. There are some restrictions that the rabbis put into place so that something that happens going into Shabbos is okay in their eyes, so that you don't make mistakes. So
That it is simple.
it is 100% similar here. Okay.
Never address your point. So done it. It hasn't gotten to where it's okay. That's what that benefit. Well,
Yeah, so I don't have a good answer to that question. On a practical level, I'm not sure what you're supposed to tell the person. Particularly, also imagine these in these Ashkenazi countries where it was very cold. I would imagine we say to them, "It is what it is. Stay inside the house," because it's a sakana. Otherwise, what are you going to do? Call the non-Jew in here to put it out. First of all, that's already a problem in of itself. I would imagine that you have no choice. If you have a situation where it's the summer and you just put it on because you like the snap crackle pop of the fireplace.
You want to read.
So you want to read. So by the way, what should you not do probably in that situation? You're not going to send you out to the cold, but what you probably should not do is read that Shabbos, that Friday night. Right? That Friday night you probably shouldn't read because to the extent that you can minimize what benefits you're getting, then you should minimize that. Yeah, that might be a practical takeaway. All right. Anyway, so anyone here who wants to use their fireplace, please go ahead and do so. Just make sure that you've lit it before Shabbos, that it's lit, and then you can let it continue to burn into Shabbos, and it'll go out on its own when the fuel is gone.
but
The remote fireplace, right? Okay, just make sure you